Hey class, I'm doing this video for you guys on impeachment because we really didn't get through it in class, so I just wanted to make sure that you had the information at your fingertips so you can look it over and we can talk about it tomorrow when we review for the exam. With regard to impeachment, there's a constitutional basis to the whole idea. An impeachment is nothing more, nothing less than a formal accusation of a public official for crimes or serious misconduct. You can think of it as a body politics means of removing a person from office based on this crime or misconduct. It's a means of the body politic to protect itself against public officials that might pose a danger to the system. Okay, and this applies to any public official. It's not just a president. It can be used against judges. It can be used against legislators, cabinet members, whatever. The constitutional basis is Article 1 and Article 2 of the Constitution. Article 1 lays out the process in the legislative branch, and Article 2 lays out the grounds for impeachment. So why don't we take a look at each one of those steps in turn. The impeachment process starts in the House of Representatives. Okay, the Judiciary Committee, the standing committee, if there is an impeachment, if there's an issue that is going on that the House members feel, well, this may be grounds for an impeachment, they'll investigate it. And if necessary, they'll draw up what's called articles of impeachment. Now, these are not a normal piece of legislation. They are the charges, essentially, being brought against a officer. In this case, we're talking about a president, but again, it can be used against any sitting official. Again, remember, the House of Representatives is the chamber of majority power. All you need is a majority vote to get an impeachment. So it's a relatively low threshold to get these charges against somebody adopted. Okay, and remember, that's all an impeachment is. The impeachment is the charges of misconduct. That doesn't mean you automatically remove the person from office. It's a two-step process. So, for example, in the Clinton impeachment back in the 90s, President Clinton was found, well, he wasn't found anything. The impeachment charges brought against him were voted on by the House of Representatives. It was a 228 to 206 vote on the perjury charge, meaning lying under oath. And then it was a 221 to 212 vote on the obstruction of justice charge, that the president had interfered with an investigation regarding the Monica Lewinsky scandal, and that he had lied under oath. Okay, now that process then turns to the U.S. Senate for the actual trial of the president. Now, in the U.S. Senate, the senators act as the jury, for lack of a better way to put it. The House members, who essentially bring the charges against the president, are called the managers of the impeachment process. They act as the prosecutors, and they can direct examine, cross-examine witnesses before the Senate. I mean, it runs kind of like a real trial. The president may hire legal counsel to cross-examine the witnesses, to bring their own witnesses, to counter the charges of, that the impeachment represents. Now, in turn, if it's the president being impeached, the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court sits as the trial judge and makes rulings on evidentiary matters, that kind of thing. Now, it requires a supermajority. 67 senators must vote to convict and remove somebody from office. And then that's what, again, an impeachment's all about, is removing somebody from office. So it's a two-step process. First the impeachment, then the trial. Okay. Now, what kind of charges can be brought against an office holder? Well, the Constitution's fairly specific. It talks about, in Article 2, treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. So what's treason? Everybody throws around the word, oh, you're a traitor, and they don't know what it means. All right, very few people know what it means. The Constitution specifically defines what treason is in Article 3, Section 3. All right. Treason is essentially um, any act in support of enemies of America during a time of war, or if you take up arms against America, okay, and fight with enemies of America. Now, I suppose the big legal question is, does Congress have to have declared war? Well, there's a lot of people that say, look, you have to declare war in order for treason to occur. You guys remember from U.S. history the Rosenbergs. The Rosenbergs, who were convicted of treason for passing secrets of America's nuclear program to the Soviet Union. They were convicted of treason. So there's others that say, well, you can be charged with treason if you are supporting, for example, Al Qaeda. Okay, quite frankly, I don't know what the law is. I believe what it is that you have to have a declaration of war. That's my understanding. Quite frankly, it's not going to matter for you on the test, but I want you to understand that treason is a specifically defined act. Okay? So, again, you can be impeached for treason. Bribery is a serious charge against any public official. Bribery is the act of giving money or some sort of gift, causing someone, in this case the public figure, to alter their behavior. Okay? So in a governmental sense, giving someone money or a gift to exercise their power that they're granted through the public trust in a way that they might not have otherwise acted. And they're doing it for personal gain. Now, some of you might say, yeah, but Duffy, what's the difference between a campaign contribution and a bribe? Well, there is a big difference. All right, there's two major differences. One, campaign contributions are legal. Two, they're considered speech. All right, they're constitutionally protected speech under the First Amendment. Just like we talked about the fact that money is speech, and thus subject to reasonable regulation by the in in Buckley versus Vallejo, back when we talked about campaign money. So too in this case, there's a significant difference. Somebody giving you money so that you can get them out of jail is maybe on the borderline. Like, remember when we talked about the Clinton pardons. On the other hand, it's probably just on the side of legal, because the money's not going to directly help Bill Clinton, for example. It's going to build him a presidential library. Again, there's lots of gray in this stuff. So is that a bribe? No. It's a campaign contribution. It's a contribution to a presidential library. Would he have done it anyways? That's a good question. And really, that's between Bill Clinton and, whatever confessor that he believes in. Now, what other charges can be brought against an office holder? We got treason. We got bribery. High crimes. What the heck is a high crime? Well, it's an English common law phrase. High crimes and misdemeanors comes to us from England. Because remember, our legal system is based on the English common law system that goes back hundreds of years and is precedential in nature. And anyways, it's basically a public offense. High crimes are considered crimes of the most that are most offensive. All right, corruption, malfeasance, which just means negligence. Look, guys, you got to understand that when somebody is elected, the people, all of them, whether they're in their district, their congressional district, a state of millions of people, a country of hundreds of millions of people, are vesting in these public officials their collective trust. All right, this idea of the public trust is a really important one when you consider this idea of high crimes. Look, if somebody violates a law and hurts one person, they can go to jail for a really long time. What if you violate a law or the public trust and you hurt millions of people? Not directly, but indirectly through some sort of governmental abuse. That's horrible. And they shouldn't serve. And that's the idea behind this high crimes idea. And it's kind of flexible. It fits the times, okay? What a high crime was 200 years ago is something totally different than it is now. Okay. Sorry about that. I had to take a little bit of a pause. Anyway, the idea of misdemeanors is any action, not necessarily a crime, that reflects badly on an office or an office holder. So, public drunkenness, uh, neglect. Look, if you've got a president who's an alcoholic, okay, and somehow gets elected to the presidency, and they're getting drunk at a state dinner, they're getting drunk at diplomatic events. All right, that's going to create a lot of problems, both diplomatically as well as in the judgment of this individual that's been hired by, or that's been hired. Excuse me, I misspoke. That's been elected into the office. Neglect. What if the individual has a nervous breakdown and they stop attending meetings, cabinet meetings. They start ignoring events going on. They neglect the duties. How do you protect against that? You can't hold another election, and so what do you do? Abuse of power. The person maintains an enemies list, okay, a list of people that anger them, and thus they use the power of the federal government against their enemies. You get an IRS audit because you criticize the president, right? That's abuse of power, and that's considered a quote misdemeanor in terms of these impeachment things. So it doesn't have to be a crime. Again, think of this impeachment process as a country's self-defense mechanism against someone who is abandoning their responsibilities under the Constitution. Okay, there has to be a way to remove them. Now, what are the standards for an impeachment? Well, the standards for impeachments is much higher for elected figures than appointed figures, like judges. Why is that? Well, look, elected figures can be removed from office very easily in an election, right? They face the people who, if they don't like the job they're doing, they get fired. Okay, they get defeated in the next round of elections. What about appointed judges? How long is the term of a judge? Exactly, it's for life. Well, how do you get rid of somebody? Answer, you don't, unless they go feet first or they resign. Well, there's got to be a mechanism to remove people if they're not doing their job. Okay? Article 3 of the Constitution also says that federal judges serve only during periods of good behavior. Well, that means they have to meet a certain standard, and if they're not meeting that standard, again, the impeachment process will remove them. Okay? Now, for the president, the standard's extremely high. You have to get a really high bar, a lot of evidence that a president should be removed outside of the election process. Okay? Because again, the president's the leader of the executive branch. They're the head of 1/3 of the entire government. And as we've talked about in class, think of what the president is the head of, the visible government. Millions of people call him boss. Right? He's co-equal to the legislative and judicial branches. And finally, well, not finally, but a final idea on this point, presidents cannot be impeached over policy differences. Look, Andrew Johnson was impeached because the radical Republicans in post-Civil War Congress didn't like how he was dealing with with the South during the Reconstruction era. Well, they impeached him for that reason, because they didn't like what he was doing. Look, that would be like Republicans trying to impeach President Obama because they don't like Obamacare. All right, how do you defeat somebody who passes a policy you don't like? Convince the electorate to elect your guy. And if you can't do that, hey, you lost in the arena of public ideas. Okay, now, the history of impeachment, briefly, there's been 19 impeachments, 15 judges, 1 senator, 1 cabinet member, and 2 presidents. The one that got away, of course, Richard Nixon. He resigned before he was impeached. The articles of impeachment were drafted, but he resigned before the House could get him. Okay, and that's what I have to say about impeachment. I'll see all of you guys tomorrow.